we have to acknowledge that this pattern of pushing ourselves into the next and next and next deadline, like always, coming off of one deadline and crashing into the next, it's not sustainable. And we have to be more proactive to lead our projects away from that pattern.
Hello from the AIE North Carolina Center for Architecture, and welcome to this episode of Talking to the Wall. Talking to the Wall is a blog series in which we answer difficult questions it seems like no one wants to talk about or answer. These questions have been generated by conversations and surveys that we've had with individuals, professionals in the design industry. Talking to the Wall is presented by Think Strategy. My name is Walt Teague. I was practicing architect for 33 years, and currently I am the creative director of Think Strategy. Our topic for this episode of Talking to the Wall is burnout. And this is a really good topic for conversation, which meant we needed to pull in somebody that is really good and a great resource for this conversation. Our guest is Je'Nen Chastain. She is an architect graduate, owner of Apostrophe Consulting, which is a purpose-driven, woman-owned management consulting practice dedicated to helping architects transform their companies. Je'Nen, thank you for being here with us today to talk about this topic.
Thanks for having me, Walt. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So our question is a very concise one. It is, how do I avoid burnout? And we could probably talk all afternoon on this topic because I think it is something that is very relevant to this day and time. But tell me, Je'Nen, how real is burnout?
It's very real, and honestly, I was so appreciative that you asked me to talk about this because it's pervasive in our industry, and I felt a little bit of pressure prepping for this because I'm very concerned about this topic. I feel like I'm watching my friends be impacted across the industry, and I am worried. I want us to find a solution towards this because people need help.
So do we feel like this is new to the design profession?
I don't think so. I think we have better language for it.
Yeah.
I think it probably is more like the volume's been turned up than anything. So I was looking into this, and I think the idea that it had different language, but the idea of burnout started around the 1970s. But it was actually in 2019 that the World Health Organization identified burnout as an actual identified language-specific issue within workplaces.
Wow. So what do firms and businesses do in their practices that contribute most to this feeling of burnout or causes of burnout?
Well, I was thinking about this as kind of three layers that you can think about. So external, internal to the firm, and then the individual or the self. So from an external standpoint, I think a lot of the pressure that we're experiencing comes from clients. It comes from sometimes on the job site when there are really difficult situations that you're dealing with in construction. And sometimes it's even regulatory when I can think about all the times people are trying to get things through permitting, and that's very challenging, causing stress. But internally to the firm, you can also think about it as a leadership challenge. There's the individual of who's running the firm or the group of individuals running the firm. How they think and manage stress can impact the way that the organization experiences stress. And that can ultimately lead to burnout. It can also show up like at the project level with your leaders who are in charge of the project itself. And then if I reflect internally with myself, burnout can come up. It's also about mental health. Like, how am I thinking about my own stress and the implications of that stress? How do I make decisions to navigate it? So some specific things to think about that firm owners should be aware of, especially I think the contract is the first and most important thing that we can do to help protect our teams. When we lead out in front of the contract and figure out what we should be including in it to protect our relationship with our client and how it's going to impact delivering the project itself, that is like the number one thing that we can do to be proactive.
Well, and when you talk about that, I think that's a very good point, because when you are contracting, then you're also committing yourself to a certain schedule and making sure that you are being realistic in the schedule that you are agreeing to.
Definitely. And to build on that idea, I think the next thing we can think about is project management, and how when we make those commitments early in the contract and then move into actually delivering on the project, how we manage is so important. There's what we project, we think that the project will take. You said time and fee, those things come up. And then there's what actually happens.
Yeah.
And those usually are not the same thing. And so that difference in how those grow further and further apart can definitely create some problems for how staff are receiving and having to manage the project.
What are some of the signs you can be on the lookout for, oncoming burnout?
Yeah, I think a lot about exhaustion and fatigue. Those tend to be the ones that people communicate. I feel exhausted, I feel tired. But you can also see cynicism showing up in people's behavior if they seem particularly negative, or even withdrawn. If you feel like they're really withdrawn in their communication or participation in the practice, that can be a sign. But I think the reality is it's about this decrease in productivity that happens. And so sometimes as an individual, that's easier to recognize. You just might feel like you're not performing like you want to or you used to. I also think about, the times that I've experienced burnout, it usually is pushing me into a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of moments where I'm finding it really hard to get the rest I need to show up the next day.
How can these signs be addressed early? How can we avoid these effects of burnout that you just talked about?
Yeah, I think that we have to acknowledge that this pattern of pushing ourselves into the next and next and next deadline, like always, coming off of one deadline and crashing into the next, it's not sustainable. And we have to be more proactive to lead our projects away from that pattern. And if it's self-inflicted, then we have to hold ourselves accountable to pull back in the way that we're managing around those deadlines. Because what burnout is repeat exposure to stress. And while we can condition ourselves to push ourselves through those deadlines, really over time, what we're doing is it's like eroding our brain and our brain's capacity to perform at peak conditions, because we never really allow the brain to completely recover. So we're just completely driving it into the ground.
So much of this, it seems, gets into, how the project may be managed and allowing that flexibility. So
that's right. And I think a lot of people get concerned about keeping people active and on their projects so that they can have billable hours.
Yeah.
But I think when we don't account for those rest periods, when we're just crashing, we get off one deadline and then we're jumping over here to go to the next.
Yeah.
We're really doing ourselves a disservice. And so thinking about how do you build rest into the delivery of a project?
So Je'Nen, is leaving the profession a good alternative to addressing burnout?
Well, I think when we think about that question, what we first need to ask is, why are people leaving? And so when you look at the research on burnout, Harvard Business Review identifies 6 reasons why burnout occurs. Like, there's factors that create that situation. So number 1, work overload. We know that to be a common trend in our industry, for sure.
Yes.
Number 2, lack of control. So not feeling like you have autonomy in your work. Number 3, insufficient rewards. So that could be compensation. Could also be just social, like, acknowledging, hey, Walt, you did a really great job on that deadline. Number 4, a breakdown in community. Number 5 is an absence of fairness. So if I don't feel like I'm being treated equally to my coworkers in how my work is being received. And number 6 is a values conflict. So inherently, like, if the work that I'm doing doesn't really actually align with my values as like what motivates me and inspires me. So I guess to come back to your question, what I'll say is, for some people, yes, it is the best solution to getting away from burnout, because if they really feel like they don't have control over the management decisions that are impacting them, yes, maybe leaving is the best way to get away from that.
So how do you see the future of the profession improving to diminish these attributes of burnout?
Well, I want to talk about some actionable things that I think firm leaders can integrate into the way that they're working. First of all, to recognize your own stress, which is, something that is you're either experiencing through clients or deadline fatigue, or there's something going on the job site that's terrible. Just recognizing and learning how to manage your own stress is such a first important step to protecting the health of your staff. Because there is a thing called secondhand stress where we all have experienced when someone in the room stressed out, you know it, and everyone's trying to protect their energy. So that's one thing. But I think when we think about how we're managing our project teams, you mentioned it, building in recovery periods after a deadline. That's so important. And I think even going a step further and thinking about really encouraging staff to take PTO, to take downtime, to really think about how can we even give people more time, to be off of their project deadline, so that when they come back on, that they're refreshed and they're ready to get going again.
Yeah, Je'Nen, this is such an important topic. There's got to be a lot of resources that are available out there. I don't know if you want to name some of those now, but we're also going to be providing a link. There's a link here on the screen that you can go to download additional information. But did you have anything you want to add on that now?
Yeah, I have tons of resources. There's Harvard Business Review. If you search burnout and Harvard Business Review, there's an entire page dedicated to this with articles and resources they're adding regularly, including a 2-minute burnout survey that you can take to see how you can actually quantify your burnout.
Excellent.
So I'm going to give you guys that link. I think it's a great resource for people looking for immediate results. And then there's tons of books out there that have become, this section in the bookstore has exploded. There's just tons of resources out there now about books on burnout. And so I'm going to give those resources. And then if you guys are interested, we also have our podcast that we've been working on, and we've had a couple of topics, including one dedicated to mental health in the profession, as well as Maya Sharfi, who was talking about how to attract and retain women in the profession, because I think burnout really severely impacts women.
So these additional resources are available, and we have those listed on the screen here for you to go to. Let's go back to the original question and wrap this up, because this has been an outstanding conversation. How would you concisely answer the question, how do I avoid burnout?
Well, I think that at the individual level, you have to have some level of awareness and prioritize self-care. I think the number one solution to burnout is building in your own, whatever rest means to you, like to build that into your lifestyle. So for some people, that's going on a run after work and getting out the anxiety. Some people, it's taking the weekend off. whatever it is, figure out how to actually make that a priority in your life for you.
That's excellent. So thank you again, Je'Nen, for being here for this episode of Talking to the Walls. We'd like to invite you to like and to subscribe to the Talking to the Wall episodes and seek out all of the rest of the episodes in this series. Talking to the Wall, once again, is presented by Think Strategy. Think Strategy is based here in North Carolina, but works throughout the United States in providing business strategic planning for design and construction professionals, helping them to grow, perform, and transition their ownership. So thank you for being with us for talking to the Walls.